make me co-host and I can promote people.
Perfect. Thanks. I will do that. Yeah. Oops. So welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for July 24th, 2024. We'll follow our agenda that was in issue number 1600 as generated in the TSC repo. Before we dive into the agenda, are there any announcements people would like to share?
I just released Node 20.16.0, so it's out.
Thanks. Any other announcements? Okay, if not, a reminder to nominate people for the contributors spotlight. It went out on Twitter. The first one went out just last week, I think. So, you can take a look and see what that looks like and nominate people if you think there's other people who would be good candidates. In terms of the CPC and board meeting updates, I don't think we have either of our CPC reps, and our board reps. So I think we'll just skip that with no updates this week. I think the board meeting is this Friday, so there might be something next week. Which takes us to the core of our agenda. We have one issue, which is to talk about add experimental script types. And we have some guests from the Typescript team, I believe, as well. So I don't know if anybody wants to, like any of the TC members, have some context or whatever that they want to add to that particular issue, or we just want to ask, I think like Daniel, you sort of flag some concerns on the issue, and if we just want to start with that.
Sorry, just waiting for this mute, but hi everyone, thank you so much for having us. I wanted to give a couple of different, examples of, or like, let's maybe start off with some of the high level, things to get it kicked off. So I think that looking at what we're trying to achieve with experimental script types, it sounds really good in theory. I think that as we got into the details, we were kind of a little bit more surprised about some of the behaviors, and then realized that there are some incompatibilities with maybe the way that TypeScript works today and the way that I think a lot of us hope TypeScript could work in Node. And so maybe it would be helpful to kind of walk through some of those. So the first big concern that we all brought up was that with experimental script types, the approach was that, and this is the state of the pull request that we're talking about today, is that with experimental script types, when Node.js encounters a TS file, the strategy would be to pick a subset of TypeScript that is sort of like easily erasable from the perspective of Node, and allow that to be run in place. And so the big concern that we had was we didn't want any sort of fragmentation of TypeScript itself, right? Because TypeScript has other constructs. And even when we've tried to steer people, like there are some constructs that I think like we feel a little bit ambivalent about on the team. Like some people really like them. Some people really think like, well, if you can do without them, you can do without them. We don't have like one big perspective on that. But even as we've tried to steer people away from the ones that we're like, please, try not to use namespaces over time because, the broader JavaScript community is going to be using like modules. We really got pushback from the community on that, saying like, well, why, right? Like we really, so like when we helped out with Babel support for TypeScript, we had a lot of pushback. So I think, keep in mind that a lot of this work was done with with the goal of satisfying, a set of users who said that their biggest hiccups, their biggest challenges with Node.js were TypeScript support, right? And I want to come back to that. But if you have this fragmentation between existing TypeScript, which is like, most of what exists today, and this sort of new subset, I don't know if that would be satisfying for those users. And I think we're not the only ones who provided that feedback. But we do have a pretty big concern about that. I think the other thing that we didn't really get to dive into very deeply was the challenges that come with sort of, well, there's another motivation, which is there's so many things. The other thing is whether or not TypeScript should be able to run from node modules, right? And the thing that we were trying to advocate against was running TS files from your dependencies. The reason being that if TypeScript has, like, the TypeScript compiler, the TypeScript language service, any analysis tool needs to actually dive into the TS source, that is a much bigger factor of code that needs to be loaded up and analyzed in order to provide IntelliSense, completions, operations like find all references and whatnot. And you really don't want your editor experience to slow down because everything in node modules now needs to be possibly reanalyzed because you have a very, very, very long unannotated dependency in some way. That's not the only reason. Another reason is because there's sort of like this syntax hazard. So if you use new TypeScript features, if your dependencies use new TypeScript features that are in expression space, you don't need to upgrade TypeScript in order to use it because those things are erased from the perspective of a TypeScript consumer today because there's only DTS files, right? You only see like what's effectively like a header file, and the implementation is you don't care about it. It's like if someone was using C23 or C99 and you're stuck on a C89 compiler in some way, but you can at least build against the header file in some way, right? So you have this ABI sort of, you want to use that terminology, right? And so if you take the premise that you really should not be publishing TS directly as the only source of truth, as like the runnable artifact, there are a whole bunch of other places where having TS runnable in place is not quite compatible with actually building TS and then running it. And I can get into the specifics of that if you'd like. I can give a couple of examples where there are some difficulties, but a lot of it comes down to all these sorts of headaches around paths and whatnot. And from the perspective of Node, you could take the perspective of, well, you should always just run in place, but that's sort of incompatible with the idea that you need to eventually publish and build in some way. And now you need another tool to kind of balance these things. So just to, like, on top of all of that, what I'm really trying to get at with a lot of this stuff is I'm not saying that we shouldn't pursue anything collectively, right? But I think that all of these sorts of design considerations need to be taken as a whole, right? Like every part of this needs to be designed intentionally with the idea that eventually the TypeScript compiler and language service could operate over this thing. And if it's not, then we're really doing a disservice for all the users who we're hoping to serve with Node.js and TypeScript. So I've been talking for a while. I'll let other people go now. Sorry.
I would just jump into what Daniel said, and I think when we think about what TypeScript support means, a lot of users can say that and mean different things. And the thing that I think about in this situation is like, if you have TypeScript that you can run directly, you can run node file.ts. what's the path forward for someone running that file, then having that file up in npm in a way that works according to everyone's constraints? Because we have problems with file extensions, we have problems with the potential paths, right? Like just kind of whole path situation in general is pretty fraught here. And we also have sort of competing constraints with the problem that if we take I think the correct approach that .ts inside node modules is not subject to this stripping to sort of force people to do the correct pre-published steps, then how do you make this scenario work in a mono repo situation where you have two packages and they both have TS and you're trying to just like run that TS directly while you got all your symlinks set up with whatever package manager you're using? So that's sort of a conflicting constraint that presents a bit of a challenge for like, what is the scenario of this? If the scenario is like, this is just for me running my build scripts locally, it's not for code that I'm going to publish eventually, then that's maybe there's no problem there. But if the end result of this is like, before you can really have this running, you have to do the same amount of configuration that you'd have to do today to use TSX, TS Node, whatever, some third-party tool, then we haven't really moved the ball. We've just moved the ball to a different place because you're still doing that same amount of configuration just to get into a working build setup.
See, Benjamin has his hand up next.
Yeah, hi. So first of all, thank you so much for coming to the meeting and like discussing this with us. I think like obviously I don't speak for everyone. The concerns you raised are like very reasonable. I think like a lot of us agree with them. I want to emphasize that like Marcos PR like is experimental. It's to land a first step, and like the goal isn't to land the first step and then unflag it as experimental immediately, but it's totally fine to take like as long as we want to like settle any concerns the TypeScript team and other parties might have with like the way Inform node runs TypeScript, and Marcos design is intentionally such that parts are pluggable and like can be changed in the future. And like the node project as a whole, and like me in particular, like we are willing to listen and work with you and make sure that like the experience users get when we unflag it is like great and something that you and us are comfortable with. So yeah, excited for this.
Matteo has his hand up next.
So yeah, hi folks. Hi Daniel. Sorry, I had to miss the first beginning of the meeting. I hope I didn't miss anything very much super important that you talk about already. But you're saying that there are two major use case and flows for people. Okay, one that build the TypeScript. Build from TypeScript to JavaScript, and then they execute the JavaScript, okay? However, in my experience, okay, this problem is enormously big in the industry right now, okay? Like it's probably the biggest source of frustration in absolute terms related to Node.js and TypeScript, mostly because there are a lot of tools like Jest, Vitest, a lot of those tools out there that are capable of running your test with in TypeScript form, okay? And there is a generic user expectation for them to be able to do so, for users to be able to do so. And then once we flip, but then everybody seems to be saying that, okay, I'm in development, I'm running my TypeScript files, and then when I am in production or production-like, I'm not doing that, okay? I am either running them via some form of type stripper, or at all, I'm just running the compile things, okay? And it's so ideally, there's completely, to some extent, there's a big bifurcation already between the various environments that people are executing their code at, okay? And I think it's a big unsolved problem. Like I personally, this is one of the sources of major frustration for me with TypeScript today. Okay, like this, and it's not TypeScript it's not the TypeScript per se. Okay, So this is the first thing. And yes, we need to solve for this to improve the situation for this specific things. However, the current system is not, I don't think it's working very well for the everyday developer, okay? Because it generates a lot of confusion and a lot of friction that it's not needed. Okay, so yes, we need to do. I think we need to do something there, but it needs to be. We need to stay, as you said, think about this is what's happening at editor level, what's happening at runtime, and what's happening in production, in the production system. Okay, and more or less design a flow there. This is the first point I wanted to say. The second one is about yes, absolutely. Like one thing, there was the node module stuff. Absolutely, I am absolutely with you. I was the first one that pointed it out in the PR that Marco said, and that is like I think that's a no. Like if we ever ship this, it cannot run inside node modules because of the constraint that you described. I've not seen 2 projects with compatible tsconfig files in my life, mostly. Okay, so it's so essentially, thank God we have DTS that can make it bearable for everybody. Otherwise, it's not going to. It's a level of complexity that's not going to work. So. Like my idea for these strip types things, okay, it's for either apps or local development. I don't want to touch at all the publishing flow, okay? Like for me, the publishing flow of TypeScript modules and so on would need to keep staying essentially as it is, because otherwise there's no point in doing that. Which also means that monorepo users are in big trouble, because we can cater for them, okay? Frankly, and this is, I don't mind. They are, almost all those users are very complex tool chains, okay? That are an infinite amount of variation possibilities over there. And I have, it gives me a little bit of, I'm one, okay? I know my tool chain is complex, okay? The problem is whatever we do, it's never going to work on all tool chains, on all setups, and so on this front. And I prefer to cater for the end user or this person that do not have a lot of engineering skills to get them to set up a complex monorepo system versus the top developers essentially, or senior developers that can do that. So yeah, that's what I had to say.
Marco's next.
Yeah. So like from our first meeting that we had with the loaders team, I took some of the feedback, and so like as Benjamin said, this PR is just the first step. Like it needs to start from somewhere, and the subset of TypeScript that we support is going to increase. It's in the roadmap. And also about node modules, I'm fine with not supporting them. So this is like a discussion that we keep on having, and it's important that we have this discussion. Also, one other thing that I captured last time is that basically like users want to be able to use the latest TypeScript features without having to lock the TypeScript version on Node.js. So I made that the TypeScript transpiler is in an external package rather than in core. It is bundled in core, but it can be potentially upgraded as a like it's published on npm, so users can just download the latest version and use it as a loader. And I remember you mentioning that like TypeScript was interested in a loader for Node.js. So the fact that we have an external package, it's like it works very well with a loader because it can be used like with /dash import, or it can be embedded in Node itself. So it could work both ways, and like as a loader, it could support all the latest features. It can support tsconfig, whatever. And as a core feature, it can just do type stripping. And like I think I just want to say that I took your feedback and moved from there. So I wanted to know like if a node loader is possible and what are the next steps on that.
Do you want to work through the queue, or do you want to answer sooner?
Just in between, could someone just please promote Yagis?
Yeah, I have tried a few times, so I should have the button.
Yeah, I did that too.
So Robert had his hand up next.
Yeah, just a quick note. We don't have to discuss that here. I'm just a little worried about the experimental rabbit hole where we release something experimental, people start depending on it, and then we end up not being able to change it.
I'm more worried about the messaging. I mean, I guess it's a very similar thing where you basically say like it's an experimental thing, it landed, and that's a very strong signal that I guess the real question is if this thing lands, what are the next steps to try to push for something more stable, because there are these concerns around these multi-project workspaces, and I can understand if there's like an idea of let's just try to scope this a little bit more, but I also wonder, like, part of me also wonders, is this actually the thing that people were asking about when they answered the survey, saying like I want better TypeScript support in Node.js? Like, are 50% of those people actually just hitting issues with like ESM, CJS interop, and now the reason that they take it out in TypeScript is because there's like a new file type, and you have to also think about like, oh, this is type, and this is this, and this is, and like a TSX is actually a module in this. You have to have all of this in your head, and if you don't, you'll hit an error message that TypeScript tells you about before you actually try to run your code or build your code. And so, yeah, I mean, I do wonder about a lot of those different specific factors, right? But because I think, to Matteo's point, I understand that, hey, this idea that Jest can just run in place, that's really attractive. But if like I get you've said like this is on the roadmap, but if you have something that's not compatible in the same way, and you say now Node can do the same thing too, but it doesn't, that's a really hard user friction, and that seems like it goes against what you're trying to accomplish. And then the other thing is, monorepos are not always the most, like, they are often complex, but they don't always have to be. There are a lot of cases where you can do something a little bit more simple and get away with like 90% of the functionality without like 2 intermediate tools to do that. So I just want to put that out there, but I guess the real question is like, where's the, hypothetically, if this thing goes in, what are the next steps given all the feedback that we've had?
I can answer that very quickly. So the first next step is to enable the transform TypeScript features, so it will support enums and everything that right now it is removed. This is the most immediate thing that we can expect to happen. The second most immediate thing is to be able to have users upgrade it independently from core. So they can just like, if there is a new version of TypeScript and our transpiler, which is SWC, supports it, and it's not breaking chain, it's a breaking chain, the users can upgrade it directly. And like, I think we can move from there. And the idea is that like users can already have loaders. They can use TSX or TSNode, like whatever. So like full TypeScript compatibility is already supported. Like what are we trying to do here is to have something that improves the developer experience. And the other thing is that this is never going to land as something feature complete at the beginning. Like it needs to start from somewhere and grow from there. So the messaging is very important, and the messaging that this PR would like to pass in terms of documentation is that this is something like the current limitations are clear and well reasoned, and we are going to move from there. But like if the concern is that these features landed something incomplete at the beginning, like I don't see how to do otherwise, because I have already spent like a lot of time on this feature, and I don't see me spending much more time if this doesn't land or doesn't go somewhere. Like if it gets blocked or closed, like you understand there is probably no point in doing in going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel's next.
Same Daniel or me, like, or someone else? Because
Sorry, Daniel Rosenwald. Yeah, sorry, you.
Oh, I might have a still hand. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I just was like, I know there's an answer in the chat, but like when Benjamin was saying like there's an easy off ramp, which is to just make it a regular loader, I just wondered, well, I guess the challenges of starting as a regular loader is that it's just not as easy to use as if it's built in and enabled via the flag, right? Like, I guess my question would be, why wouldn't we do that? Is that a valid option, or and if not, why not? Because I just was going off of some of the people's concerns of like Robert, like, hey, what if we get experimental, can't turn it off? We have an experimental, we have a loader which you installed through NPM or something, and then it just did the same thing. What are the challenges with that? Just help me understand.
Like the thing is that loaders already exist, and like we could just take whatever loader already exists and it works, and that would be like the same thing. Also, to have a loader that has all the features that we want, it's going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to take time. So like. And users probably are not going to care much because there are already like 10 better alternatives. So like, is it worth to put all this effort when there is already something better outside core? The problem is inside the core, like users want the developer experience, and like this whole PR is about that, because otherwise this could have been solved with a user package.
Okay, thanks. So it's just about like it being there by default versus not. I see a few people chiming in. Okay, understood. So Mateo's next.
So I wanted to clarify one thing. Okay, it's and I think it's a most probably one of the biggest question. Okay, that we need to try to get an answer of. Okay, and it's fundamental here. Is stripping types, like is not performing any type checking at runtime the good thing? Okay, and like for me this is the most pressing question, and the fundamental point of it. There are two sides of these coins. Okay, and one side says no, well, the side it only happens in the editor, or TypeScript is just a linter. Okay, and the other side is no, it's actually something that needs to run before running your code. Otherwise, things can, a lot of bad things can happen here. Okay, essentially these are the two, from my point of view, the two side of that question. And to be honest, this is, I think, where we should be one of the questions that we should be asking. Okay, and give ourselves an answer for this. Okay, or maybe even acknowledge that there are two options here. Okay, and user, here are the two options, because you know what you want to do. We need to give you the two options, because otherwise it's nothing. Okay, I just wanted to share to a little bit of a screen share. Okay, sorry about this. It's okay. So a long time ago, okay, I did. Can you see this? Okay, yeah. I opened this issue back in 2022. Frankly, I think it's still very much relevant to the discussion. Okay, I put TypeScript Node Core here, but this could actually be just TypeScript if the TypeScript team is willing. Okay, and essentially make it load automatically from node modules. Okay, essentially making it node run like TS Node or something like that. Okay, and this is, I don't know how this would work. This is a question mark. Okay, underneath. But this is something that it's a flow that we could support in theory. Okay, and nobody has said that we don't want this. Okay, so I just wanted to point out that there is this option. Okay, at least for the people that would want to do full type checking before running things. Okay, so there is that. Okay. Also, I wanted to point out this. It might be an obvious data, but you might not be familiar with it. This is TS Node, and this is TSX in the amount of downloads and popularity. I just, it's. I don't want to pick too much from these numbers. They're not worth much, to be honest. But the genetic gap between doing full type checking versus just transpiling versus just type stripping is massive. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out, because it might be that people do not realize that there is this gap. So,
sorry, just for my benefit, which is TS Node the full TypeScript, or is TSX?
Yes, TS Node is the full TypeScript system, okay. And TSX is essentially a type stripper, different implementation, but it's it's an order of magnitude of usage in between the two. Okay, now, and it goes on the same in the same question that Daniel was asking, and it is what exactly are the user asking for? Okay, to some extent. And it's and again, we should try to give an answer, to refine an answer to that.
I see Antoine has his hand up next.
Yeah. So maybe I can answer quickly to Matteo. I don't think Marco's PR goes against that. I think we can have both a type stripping feature and npm install global TypeScript that would make Node run as a TS Node. I think we're just changing subject, and we should focus on that same topic. And I wanted to answer Robert concerns. Last week we discussed having a build time flag to hide the feature away, basically. So only folks who manually compile Node could use the feature. I think that's enough to make sure no one is going to rely on it on production, because the number of people building a custom node is very tiny. But yeah, just wanted to put it out there.
I think just to clarify, Antoine, though, that's not in the current PR, right?
The build, I'm not sure. Marco, can you maybe answer that?
No, there is no compile flag. It's just that at runtime.
Daniel R, you're up next.
Oh, I actually, can Jake go first? I think he had a specific point about loaders he wanted to get to.
Sure. Go ahead.
No, I have multiple comments, but the first one, I think that's the general consensus from at least the TypeScript side is to not do type checking at runtime. Like TSX doesn't, SWC loader wouldn't. I mean, if we're going outside the node sphere, like Bun doesn't, Dino is its own thing. I think the general scheme is that like you probably shouldn't be trying to go load the full TypeScript in to like do the full type check of files before you run them. I think that's the general scheme that we're saying that we would prefer. The other one is that TS Node is definitely just like the oldest one of these libraries that used to like to load all this code using TypeScript. And there's a lot of alternatives to TS Node that aren't just TSX as well. But even so, I think it's mentioned in the meeting chat that TS Node also has the ability to run without using any sort of type checking. The thing actually that in relation to what Mateo was talking about, and I think he said some questions in chat from Joy, is what it last time at the loaders meeting we had I had heard multiple times from I think the loaders team that there was future work that like just needed resourcing or something about making loaders easy to use. And I think that a lot of the friction of loaders today is that like people just don't want to write node -- import equals TSX and run their code, right? And so it's hard to tell from the survey whether or not the entire complaint is I just want to run node and then the file name. And I think Mateo had shown like the issue where they're just running node code. What is like the extra, like what is that effort or work to actually like auto load loaders or auto load a config like that? Because it'd be really interesting to know like if that were done, would any of this work be needed inside of Node Core to actually support, something like TypeScript? Or would everyone actually be satisfied just setting a flag in their config that says, yeah, load TSX for me automatically? And would all this work basically no longer matter because everyone is just like, well, I'll just use the outside loader instead because it moves faster and I don't have to worry about it breaking Node or like Node pinning back because some syntax change was made. I'm just curious, like, what that effort looks like.
I think Daniel's your hand's up next.
Yeah, I mean, I want to. I want to actually get the loader discussion, so I'll just lower my hand permanently for a while.
Okay, Benjamin and then Ruben, but I don't know if either of you are responding to that loader.
Yeah, so I just like first, sorry if I'm going before you, Marco, but like just like my point was that the things that Marco has been doing with Amaro, with taking it outside and making it pluggable, is very similar to the things you have been talking about with regards to loaders. So there is like a generic effort of like maybe let's have arbitrary loaders we can use that detect types. And then if we look at like, and again, this is my perspective, not the project's, what users have been asking for, they've been asking for TypeScript very specifically. The issue, like the surveys don't say like custom loaders loading arbitrary programming languages, or like custom loaders like allowing us to load like was embedded or like other languages. They're specifically TypeScript. So the work Marco has been doing will let users load TypeScript in the TypeScript config by default, and B, make that entirely pluggable so they can still go -- import and like reconfigure and change the way in order to either like opt out of TypeScript or use a different tool or like whatever they want to configure, like how they're loading TypeScript differently. So I agree with like a lot of Jake's points. I just wanted to briefly mention that Marco's work actually like complements and agrees with that rather than like contradicts it.
Yeah, like what I would like to remark is that the fact that we have decoupled the TypeScript, the transpiler from the core itself, it makes it a collaboration space where we can like both work for what's inside the core and work for an external loader. They can be the same thing and they can exist at the same time. So like what would really like make me happy is to like continue to cooperate on this side. Like if you're like the concerns that you express, we can work on them, and we can like figure out on the go. But right now, like I don't see it starting as something that is not in core. Like I don't see it starting just as an external loader and nothing in core. So like the concerns that you expressed, I think we can definitely fix them. Like it seems pretty reasonable.
So for me personally, about loaders, etc., like keeping it modular is something that probably no one really disagrees with. That's my feeling at the moment. But we need to default. We need something that works out of the box for people. That's what they are asking for. Like from the developer experience perspective, it has to just run. And that is like the first step, as far as I see it, from the current PR that goes into that direction by adding a feature flag at the moment, and later on, hopefully, we don't need that at all anymore. It just works. You just start it up because it detects NTS and we are good. And the question is just how do we get there? But I don't believe the loaders, as it was suggested, is that direction. And I agree with Marco, it has to be something coming from Node Core because it has to just work out of the box.
Benjamin's up next.
Yes, sorry, I just forgot to lower my hand. My bad.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Matteo.
I just wanted to ask also the question that Ryan posted in the chat. What I'm describing in that issue at a high level, it's essentially a pre-configured loader. Okay, it's something that if you try to run node.js, okay, knows to try to load a dependency. Okay, if that dependency is not there, okay, it throws a nice error. Okay, and it throws a nice error and says install that. Okay, and that's it. That's what it does. Okay, and it's that's the gist. Okay, I just wanted to clarify the point here. That's what it does. Okay, it's the core of that feature. So you cannot have a generic loader inside like a complete pluggable system, because otherwise you will need people to type this in. Okay. But essentially saying something like that, okay, it's like one of the goals is I think we should provide a solution that works without having user to provide a config file and having a user to configure something, okay? This, I think, is a clear requirement that we are discussing here. We want the complexity to be easy. Like my read of that survey and my read of the feedback that I've seen on the wild is once you know how the intricacy between all the tools fit together, okay, essentially you are more or less good, okay? The current solutions are complex but work, okay? Getting there, though, is actually quite a bumpy road. Getting that knowledge is quite a bumpy road, okay? So, well, there are a possibility where there are some trade-offs and things that will make it impossible to do certain things with the current tooling set, but that's a completely different topic. So it's so yes, so that was my original idea. If you want to, and I'm sorry going back there, but it's like that is essentially. It's to some extent very easy to ship if we want to go in that direction. Okay, it doesn't require much. The only bit that requires is some sort of long-term stability of it. So yeah, that's my point. So
I think the thing I wanted to clarify was just that the main difference between what's currently in the current PR and what you proposed earlier is in what you proposed, the user would have to do an npm install, and then it would just work. In this case, they just have to add the command line, right? And I think that's the one, if the question is, if the answer is you don't need, we don't want people to do any sort of npm install, then what you propose doesn't quite fit that. If it's like doing an npm install would be enough, but then it just works, then what you've got, this could easily be adapted to do that, to be like, basically it looks for the Amaro thing, and if it's been installed, it uses it, otherwise it doesn't, right? Like, but that seems to me the key point is from a user experience perspective, is asking for that npm install too much? If so, then what you propose doesn't work. If yes, maybe it's an option. Jake had, sorry, Danielle had his hand up next.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just from what I'm both seeing in the chat as well as what was just discussed, by Matteo, you can totally imagine a flow where this thing prompts you, right? It's a one-time thing. It basically is a system-wide thing, but then on a package level basis, you opt in to saying like, yeah, I do want to be able to run TypeScript in some way, right? And so I think like maybe the difference is that there is something a little bit more blessed in that workflow that Matteo mentioned, whereas maybe with what Joy has said, it is opt in on a package level basis. So the nice part about that is the person running the system is able to actually opt into like what capability, like what is a trustworthy version of a loader, what is a trustworthy version of like something that can transform TypeScript. And then on a package level basis, you say, I need something called TSX to transform me so I can load. And then that just sort of works. It is maybe a little bit of extra friction in CI and system-wide running, but like once you've done it on one system, it kind of just works, and you can also potentially fold it into the installation process too. So I haven't given it much thought at this point. Another thing that we have experimented with on our side is our own loader. We actually, after discussing this stuff last time, and hearing that like, hey, loader capabilities are going to be improved over time, we went off and tried to implement it ourselves. We did hit a couple of technical flags that were we can provide feedback on. There was some friction around actually supporting it for CommonJS. That one was, I mean, I don't know if that's by design or if that's something that like it's a point in time issue. We did end up finding that we were starting to think like, hey, do we need to read actual configuration to make decisions on compilation and things like that, to the point where TSX and TS Loader exist, and they allow people the flexibility and the options that they want in some cases. So like maybe there's some room for a blessed one, but also there was a notion of like, why compete? Why try to rebuild this thing that already does a good job as well? Why not just let these things be the loaders in some way and then just try to collaborate there? So that was kind of where we left off on a lot of this stuff.
Antoine has his hand up next.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could maybe go back discussing the Marcos PR, because we're about almost at time. Like, what are the roadblocks? What would need to change in that PR so it can land? Is there any concern to land it with a compile time flag, for example? Maybe we can see if we have consensus on that.
So okay, we could ask maybe a few questions.
Yeah,
like,
is there any concerns? Yeah.
First one, any concerns with landing with the compile time flag?
I guess with compile time flag, like no user will ever do this. We will ever use it. Like I don't see it. Like even how are we going to find bugs How we're going to iterate on this if like nobody uses? And from the survey, we know that like 0% of our users build their own version of Node, like nobody does. So I don't think it makes sense because it doesn't allow iteration, doesn't find bugs, it doesn't attract contributors. I don't know.
I guess so. Let's ask the other question. So, like, any concerns with landing it with only a runtime flag?
So I just want to say from the TypeScript side, like if we want to actually provide feedback on this, compile time flag is just a pain in the butt for us as well, right? Like, yeah, we could figure out how to compile Node and whatnot, but it would frankly be easier to say, here's a nightly build of Node or like some pre-release or something like that, and run with experimental. And that would allow us to at least provide feedback if we're intent on trying to like at least use this as an iteration point, right? I think the key thing is that we really need to feel like the feedback is getting taken like with deep consideration, right? Like we're not trying to put stop energy. We're trying to make sure that like whatever we put out collectively is what serves TypeScript and Node.js users the best. And so we really just need like understanding and assurances that you know, like we're not going to have this weird situation where, oh, it's been an experimental for 3 years or something like that. It has to go out. It's already worked this way. We can't change anything about it. Stuff that people have already said, like, we don't want to land in the experimental trap of like, it has guaranteed semantics, even though it's always been experimental. So that's kind of the perspective I have, at least.
Ryan?
Yeah, I think, sorry, I think if I had to summarize my concerns that at least I had going into this, it was mostly about, you know, this is experimental. We're here to collect feedback, and that's really awesome. The concerns that I had are mostly around like, you know, what the next step is in the process for the users who want to publish or want to run a monorepo or other associated things. To me, it's like I don't see paths forward there, and that can be okay, right? That can be something that we say that's out of scope for this solution. But the sort of red flag that I wanted to raise, and I think Mateo addressed my concerns, was like, I don't want anyone to think that, oh yeah, we can get this out there and then we'll figure out monorepos later, because I think it's not just like, oh, we need a few lines of code, right? It's going to be pretty comprehensive if we have to go down that road. So as long as it's like caveated and, you know, not even necessarily externally caveating, it's like we just need to understand within this group that it's likely that those issues are going to be like very, very vexing. And if it's just about running local apps and local scripts, I think it's actually pretty. It's definitely something that we can experiment on. I just wanted to clarify what the scope of next steps are. So that's great.
I think Robert was next.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that my comment wasn't negative in any fashion regarding the experimental and landing it as such. It's more that we need to have a strategy or some way to communicate so we don't end up in that rabbit hole that Daniel is also worried about.
So I guess back we want to like, are there any concerns with running with only a runtime flag? I think the one of the things we discussed before was like landing it with the runtime flag, but then adding a compile time flag for what we would backport to a previous version and not actually like shipping it in previous LTSs for a while. So I don't know if we should break up the questions, like just landing as a runtime flag and backporting as regular, or some other variant on that. Benjamin has his hand up.
Yeah, sorry. I just I just wanted to say that, like, as long, and again, this is just my perspective, as long as we communicate super clearly that the runtime flag is experimental, not because we expect it to move necessarily as is to stable, but because we want to collect feedback, it's fine to like land wherever, backport wherever, as long as like when we communicate it, we don't communicate it as, hey, Node does TypeScript now, everyone adopt it, but hey, Node is experimenting with TypeScript. We want to get a feedback and see how people use this and like go from there. And I also agree, like I would love for us, I know like we're sort of out of time, just to like come to a consensus to not move this to like stable without first like consulting the TypeScript team and like getting their blessing, because I think it's really important that we figure out a way together to provide like an experience that like our users would like it would be the best for our users. And like the TypeScript team obviously has a lot more experience like with Node plus TypeScript than like the TSC. So that's like the 2 points.
Mateo has his hand up.
So I absolutely see the problems that Ryan is making. Okay, I am conscious of that problem point. Okay, and I think we can even, to some extent, bolt on these on the hypothesis of this implementation. Okay, I'm very happy to stay behind saying no. NPM publishing and monorepos are out of scope. Okay, if you want to use that, use other tools. These are not the stuff that we are going to support with this. Okay, and maybe point to those other tools if they exist and when they exist. Okay, but at least it's if we can do something for all the other users, like I consider both of those things really advanced cases to some extent, considering the average skill of our users. So I would very much not worry too much about them. Okay, and it's yeah, that's my 2 cents. If you can transfer the meeting to me, Michael, I can keep
I'll
going
do
for
that.
a few more minutes.
Thanks.
And so yes, that's my take. Okay, and I think it's we can make these as part of the decision-making process, and essentially say, use other system for other things. Okay, and iterate, gather feedback, see if those 2 cases are actually, if we need to go back and say, no, we need to do something different because we actually need to change those hypotheses and go back essentially to the drawing board. But we need to make sure that whatever we do is not the flip, does not prevent users to do their own things with monorepos and publishing and so on and so forth.
Just like the PR in its current status doesn't have any block and could be landed. So like for collaborators, if you want to block or you want to leave feedback or like someone feels like blocking, go ahead though.
So it sounds like I mean we've provided the current state of concerns, and I think if it would be helpful to sort of bring many of those specifics into the fold for like the broader TSC, then we can do that going forward as well. I mentioned in the chat that the grow up story is like a big one that at least I'm really concerned about, and I want to make sure that we have some good path forward there. We've thought about it, but maybe we need to think about it more, and we'd have some more like eyes on it that would help too. So in the end, we're okay with like hashing out the rest of the detail, like letting everyone hash out the rest of the details on the pull request, and if it's ready, then we won't technically can't block, but we won't block the PR. But I think there's just a lot of goodness to just collaborating on this entire workflow and trying to understand like what are users really running into, how are we going to be able to provide a solution, is this going to be good enough? And we have good gut feels about it, but we might need to talk to some users and hone on it a little bit. So yeah, the short story is we don't have blocking concerns right now. We just have, you know, more design space that I think could be explored once this thing is experimental, if you want to take that angle on it.
Amazing. Okay, I think we are. Oh, Ruben, sorry.
So, like, first of all, I think that's a great conclusion. I just wondered about the next steps in this case. And in this case, like, we do have some specific topics that we want to push sometimes and to champion topics. And I believe this one would be a great one for that, and like how to continue to improve on the TypeScript integration in Node. And maybe even have working group, because I believe that close collaboration that you've just spoken about, Daniel, is something that we also need in this case. So like that's still for me the only open question for today. Like, how is that collaboration going to look like? Just issues on GitHub is, for me personally, not normally the best way to communicate. At least not the only way.
I guess we can either like the loaders probably would be the working group that is more related, but we can also have another working group, or I think we can figure out like a forum of collaboration.
I personally think that the loaders is not the right group for that discussion, mostly because we really want to have feedback from and discussing about the user experience, while the loaders group is usually very deep down in the trenches of APIs and deep down discussions. So if like a lot of this conversation today was about, you know, high level user expectations, okay? And while the loaders group is, okay, is this function a sync or a sync, and how we make the communication is this not being a total madness. And I'm calling total madness because it's actually very, very complex these days to understand, okay? So it's just clarifying and so on. So I just wanted to say, probably I think it might be better to split the discussion into its own. I think TypeScript support in Node.js is worthwhile to be its own initiative, okay, at least, and maybe have a little bit of a team and a repo, okay, in there, so that you can so there is a venue of collaboration that is separate from the one of loaders, and keep the loaders focused on the nitty-gritty of the internals. Which I think personally might be slightly better, but this is my 2 cents.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Like we can definitely do that.
Okay, would you mind to create you know, you see that there is this champions for initiatives and so on in the strategic initiatives. If you can want to start one for that, and then maybe open a repo. Open an issue to open a repo, essentially.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
sounds good.
I think we could make a new team for it.
Yeah.
So that we have people who are like, because lots of people are only interested in TypeScript stuff and don't care about all the loaders stuff. So we should make a new team for it. I'm not sure about a new repo though, because like the implementation is in the loaders code.
Yeah.
And we already have a lot of legacy issues with the loaders repo and so on related to TypeScript.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm fine. I just, you know, I just want to a team, and we need a way.
A team and an initiative, sure.
And an initiative, a team, something that can allow people to be pinged quickly for that, okay? So that we can gather the feedback. And I don't know, we should probably invite the folks, the TypeScript folks, to be on that team, so that we can just ping them quickly on issues.
Daniel, do you want to let us know who from your team would want to be added to the like a Node.js / TypeScript team, and then they would get the notifications for anything with that tagged on it.
Should I follow up?
I mean, you
with
don't have to tell me right
email?
now, but just
Yeah.
send us the
Okay.
list of GitHub usernames at some
Yeah.
point.
Okay, cool. You can do that.
Perfect. Okay, so this seems to move things forward. Thank you very much for the meeting. We went very much over, and this is good, and we got a lot of progress. Michael left, so I was left to chair and close up the meeting. I guess we don't have time for any of the other stuff that we usually do for the few folks that are watching us on YouTube. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, and see you all next week. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.